Heto ang Oragon Internet Television. Maaasahan sa Balance News in Public Affairs, Education, Music and Information gamit ang makabagong teknolohiya sa pamamahayag. Maaasahan sa katotohanan, kaagapay ng mamamayan sa pagkikipag-ugnayan sa pamahalaan. Oragon Internet Television Broadcasting.
Magandang umaga po mga kaibigan. Welcome aboard. Welcome to Tapatan sa Aristocrat. Ngayong araw na ito, pag-uusapan po natin ng isyong hindi mawala-wala sapagkat may kinalaman ito sa ating soberenya, sa ating likas na yaman, at kung ano ang ating kinakaharap sa matinding hamon ng panahon. Magandang umaga po mga kaibigan. We're happy to have you with us today. Marami ang ating resource persons na may kakayahang talakayin ng mga issue at mapapag-usapan po naman ito ng maayos sa ating po namang tapatan sa Aristocrat. We're hoping that everything will be fine on Facebook Live. We will be joined by Dr. Melo Banlawi. We already have with us Attorney J. Bakal, the Associate Dean of the UP College of Law. We have Engineer Daniel Ocampo, a certified open water diver and award-winning underwater photographer. We also have with us Attorney Rose Liza Aisma Osorio, a professor and researcher on environmental law and international environmental law. Ganun din po naman, siya ay mula sa University of Cebu School of Law. We're expecting Professor Lucio Blanco Pitlo III. And we hope our good friends from the Department of Agriculture and the National Task Force on West Philippine Sea will be able to join us. We send them invitations to sit with us. But anyway, let's start our discussions today. Anong pinakahuli sa South China Sea or West Philippine Sea? Attorney J. Bakal, good morning. Magandang umaga po. Paki-unmute lang.
Hi, good morning. I was just saying, I also depend on the same news sources as you. But syempre, the last bits that came out, di ba, the Chinese vessels have mostly left Juan Felipe Reef. Parang yung huli ko nakita, mga 8 na lang daw yung tira. Pero nag-disperse lang siya actually all across the West Philippine Sea. So nakikita siya in different places na mga iba-iba pang bahura. Some of them are outside our exclusive economic zone, which is fine, pero still a lot are inside. No? Apart from the incident with the ABS-CBN team 2 weeks ago, or last week, we have not heard anything more. No? I assume that the maritime patrols are continuing. That's why monitor ng AFP yung pangyayari. And related developments, of course, yung balikatan exercises started last week. And so you have the presence of the US in the region and in the Philippines. No? Dito sa South China Sea, you have a carrier task force carrying out exercises. No? At last in the last news I saw was that they were in the area of Taiwan. No? So it's probably also related to events in Taiwan.
Okay. Would you say that the departure of the Chinese vessels had something to do with the closed season?
Well, it's hard to tell din naman because that could be one of the reasons, of course, that they can use to say to justify why the vessels departed the reef. But the thing is, they're still in the area. They're still around other reefs naman. So they, if it were a closed season, they should have already departed the reef. But the thing is, they're still in the area. They're still around other reefs naman. So they, if it were a closed season, they should have already.
Yes. Okay. All right. Issue talaga ito, mga kaibigan. Can we hear the views of Attorney Liza Isma Osorio from Cebu? How do you look at the conditions? And welcome aboard, Attorney.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Buntag from Cebu. Yes, I think we're as aware as what's happening in the West Philippine Sea. I'm talking in behalf of Oceana. Tapos I think I would be focusing more on the illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing that is supposed to be happening in that area because, as you know, IUUF, acronym. It's a global threat to fisheries. So alam naman natin na yung pangingisda natin is in an alarming state of decline. So notwithstanding any management and conservation sa ating mga isdaan and ating marine biodiversity dito sa loob ng Pilipinas, kung hindi natin masupil yung mga nangyayari na pag kukuha ng pag-overfish ng West Philippine Sea, tayo pa rin ang magsasuffer. So yun, I think we need to have a stronger fight, a stronger message coming from the government, not only in terms of yung territorial or dispute or our rights, EEZ, but also in making sure that the resources there are protected kasi it has a very big impact if mawala yung mga sources and sink natin na isda doon, tayo naman din ang mawawalan din sa Pilipinas sa loob ng ating teritoryo ng mga resources.
Lisa, according to Undersecretary Caballero of the Department of Agriculture, there are about 294,000 fishermen from Region 1 to Mimaropa who are dependent on the South China Sea or West Philippine Sea. But don't you think this will be a very big economic blow to the livelihood of these people?
Yes, I do agree. It's a big economic blow to them. Kasi yun nga, these are subsistence fishermen. So kung talagang alam naman natin ngayon na in the state of overfishing yung lahat ng mga fishing grounds natin all over the Philippines, and tapos nagdagan mo pa ito, that would really impact them economically. Alam naman natin with COVID-19, medyo lahat ng tao din na nawala ng trabaho at umuwi sa probinsya nila, bumalik sa pangingisda. So doon, i-add mo pa yung mga na solely dependent on fishery for their subsistence. So
okay. Yeah, Attorney, I'll be asking you about the losses in peso terms a bit later, okay? Can we hear from a good friend, Danny Ocampo? Danny, good morning and welcome aboard. Tell us what you know.
Yes, good morning, Melo, at sa mga kasama natin ngayon dito. Ako po si Danny Ocampo, yung campaigner ng Oceana on stopping illegal commercial fishing. May I share my screen, Melo, so I can share what we've been monitoring for the past few years, Recto Bank and other areas in the West Philippine Sea.
Go ahead.
Medyo may technical issue. May internet dito sa bahay, pero I'll do my best. Thank you sa Pilipinas, ganyan talaga. Anyway, okay. So can you see my screen now?
Yes. Yes,
okay.
please.
So shameless plug to. Oceana kasi we launched Karagatan Patrol in 2019 together with League of Municipalities localities of the Philippines. And if you remember, noong 2019 din, nagkaroon ng banggaan or binangga isang bangka ng Pilipinas, yung FB Jember.
Yung bangka ng China, right?
Bumangga sa may FB Jember sa Recto Bank or Lead Bank. So, ang Karagatan Patrol ay isang plataforma kung saan in-encourage namin ng iba't ibang sektor, mga scientists, mangingisda, government agency, bantay dagat, LGU, sino-sino pa na mag-report ng mga nangyayari ng illegal fishing. At dito rin, nagbabahagi kami ng impormasyon tungkol sa mga nadedetect na satellite o yung VIIRS, visible infrared imaging radiometers, na nakaka-detect siya ng mga malalakas na ilaw. At yung aming consultant, si Jessie Flores, ay kina-convert na itong mga nababasa na ilaw na to sa mga mapa na mapapakita ng mga pangingisda gamit ang malalakas na ilaw. Ito yung nakunan lang kagabi ng satellite na dumaan. So every night dumaan yung satellite dito sa ibabaw natin. At kung titingnan natin, yung mga mapuputing lugar dyan sa mapang yan, yun yung mga liwanag na nakikita sa iba't ibang lugar. Meron sa lupa, meron sa dagat. So kung titingnan mo, ang Manila, no, ang lakas talaga ng liwanag na nade-detect ng satellite. Pero kung titingnan rin natin sa Recto Bank, halos parehas yung lakas ng liwanag na nade-detect ng satellite sa Lead Bank. Ano naman yun, wala namang syudad doon, kasi laki ng Manila. So, ang premise nito is that maaaring yan ay mula sa mga barko o bangka na gumagamit ng malalakas na ilaw para mangisda. So, ang implikasyon nun is marami dito sa area sa West Philippine Sea, kung tingnan natin dito sa Recto Bank, kaliwa, pataas, halos lahat yan napupuno ng mga ilaw na. Tapos ang ginagawa ng Oceana through our GIS expert ay i-convert yan to a map to show na yung maaaring mga barko. So kung titignan natin yung mga red dots na yan, parang kuto, no? Bawat red dot ay napo-cover ng 25 hectares na kung saan may na-detect yung satellite na malakas na liwanag na maaaring galing sa barko na nangingisda. So kung titignan natin ang Pilipinas, hinati na sa 12 fisheries management areas at doon sa bandang kaliwa sa may West Philippine Sea, yung bandang Palawan, yung FMA 5 yung isa sa pinakalaging maraming nakikitang yung satellite ng mga ilaw. So kung titignan natin doon sa may analysis na sinagawa ni Jessie from April 3 to 9, ang kung titignan natin, yung Mimaropa area, yung Region 40, ay 23% ng lahat ng nadedetect na liwanag doon nakikita sa may Mimaropa. So yan yung area ng Palawan at West Philippine Sea. Tapos kung titignan natin kung probinsya naman ng Basihan at pagtingin po saan maraming mga ilaw na detect sa satellite, pumukuna pa rin ng Palawan doon. At ito ay isang animation na ginawa ko base dun sa mga mapang ginawa ni Jessie. It's a trend map ng Marso kung saan ito yung madalas heavy fishing. No? So from March 2013 hanggang 2021, tingnan natin yung kung paano nagbabago yung mga nadedetect na ilaw dyan. Halos perennial talaga noong 2013 medyo kaunti, tapos parami as time goes by, lalo na ngayong may pandemya. So nakakabahala talaga. Hindi talaga dapat natin ignore yung presence na to. At siguro gusto ko na rin banggitin sa pagkakataong ito, hindi na naman yung satellite yung maaari natin pagbasehan ng mga maaari violations sa karagatan natin. Kakapasa last year nung FAO 266, yung pagre-require ng vessel monitoring sa lahat ng mga commercial vessels dito sa Pilipinas. At syempre yung AIS system na kung saan dapat na monitor talaga yung mga foreign vessels na pumapasok. At malaki yung pakarusahan kapag sila ay nagpapatay ng mga transponders nila. Kaya dapat talaga pinapanagot yung mga illegal vessels na pumapasok sa atin. Tapos pinapatay nila yung tracking devices nila. Tapos ito yung trend, no? Kaya nasabi ko, from 2013 hanggang 2021, patuloy na tumataas talaga halos yung mga nade-detect ng mga pumapasok, ng mga maaring nangingisda doon sa Recto Bank base din sa mga ilaw. So, yun lang muna siguro. At siguro sana sa point na to, ang kaya nga na nasabi ng Cornelisa, hindi lang naman issue yan ng teritoryo, issue yan ng kabuhayan ng mga Pilipino. At noong June 2019, ng panahon ng kasagsagan ng issue sa Recto Bank, sinabi nila Dr. Deo on ng UPMSI na halos 33 billion pesos ang nawawala sa atin mula dun sa mga nawawalang likas yaman natin sa may West Philippine Sea kasi base yun sa valuation nila sa mga coral reefs. So maraming salamat.
Danny, would our technology be able to identify from which countries these boats have come from?
Yung pinakitang mapa, yan hindi siya nakaka-identify ng identity ng vessels. Pero yung vessel monitoring measures at yung AIS system, yun sana, yung paraan para malaman mo kung anong, kasi yun, mas detalyado yun ang ibibigay sa yung datos nun ay pangalan ng barko, flag paning bansa siya or flag carrier, direction, course, and so on. So, yun yung matagal ng hinihiling talaga ng osyana sa Pilipinas na sa ngalan ng pangalaga at pangangasiwan ating pangisdaan, napakahalaga ng vessel monitoring system at yung pag-implement ng vessel monitoring measures sa lahat ng barko. At sa international treaties naman malinaw na kapag yung mga foreign vessels pumapasok sa ating karagatan, dapat talaga naka-on kanilang AIS, yung kanilang automatic identification system. Kaso, base sa pag-aaral rin namin, minsan, mawawala. Naglalaho yung mga foreign vessels. Bigla sabihin ko anong bandera talaga nila.
Lani, let me ask you, alin yung mas madalas at yung mas kukonti? Yung nagpapatay. Sabi mo, merong nagpapatay. Yun, it's more of a practice or an exception to the rule? Paano?
Depende. Kasi we've been monitoring, for example, yung aming pisila sa Amerika, tinatag nila yung Global Fishing Watch na kung saan minamonitor talaga yung movement ng mga vessels. So every week na or every day, nakakatanggap kami ng alerts. Kakakalang kami na doon sa mga alerts sila pinapadala, yung identity ng mga vessels na pumapasok, napaka-kaunti ng mga na-identify na fishing vessels, karamihan, mga carrier, mga cargo. Pero kung titignan naman natin sa trend sa West Philippine Sea, bakit doon, at kahit yung mga namin mga commercial operators sa Subic na pupunta sa Scarborough show, sasabihin nila, ang daming banyagang nangingisda dyan na malalaking barko. Pero bakit hindi na kita ng ating gobyerno doon sa tracking system? Kasi dapat doon makikita mo Pero saka ganoon rin sa ocean na nawawala yung mga barkong yun doon sa may analysis nila ng mga pumapasok na barko. I don't know if Dr. J has something to say there kasi parang importante talaga minomonitor na natin sila using technology. Kaso parang laging in the dark kami doon sa pag-monitor ng maaring pagpasok ng fishing vessel.
Dani, parang literally and figuratively, in the dark.
In the dark talaga. Maybe Dr. J can say something then.
Yes, Dean. Go ahead.
Yeah, kaya nga tawag dyan dark fishing vessels.
Okay.
Yeah, when they go dark, that means talaga pinapatay na yung AIS o transponder nila. The thing is, lahat ng Chinese fishing vessel, for example, meron yan. Kasi yun yung paraan para ma-monitor nung China yung movement nila. At ginagamit nila sarili nilang GPS, yung Beidou system. Yung additional advantage ng Beidou sa regular GPS, yung Beidou, may facility for communication din, parang may text messaging na platform din. Para madaling mag-communicate sila. Alam nila at any time kung nasan agad yung isang barko nila. No? So kung sakaling tatawag ng tulong yan from say Chinese government vessels, mapupuntahan nila agad. So definitely on part of the Chinese, alam nila kung nasan yung mga barko nila at saan nag-ooperate anong ginagawa. Kung nangyayari yung pagpatay ng AIS, therefore alam din nila and in a way parang pinapayagan nila. Okay. Yung sa Vietnamese naman, hindi ko alam kung meron din silang parang ganung equivalent. No? I don't think they have their own GPS system. So nakikisakay siguro sila sa ibang system.
Okay. Dr. Mel Balawi is already with us. Siya po ay isa sa mga kinikilalang dalubhasa sa larangan ng intelligence at security. He is the director of the Center for Intelligence and National Security Studies, constituent unit of the Philippine Institute for Peace, Violence, and Terrorism Research. Good morning, Romel. Welcome.
Good morning, Melo. I-off ko lang muna yung video para mas malakas yung ating connection. Hindi maputol yung ating usapan. Isa-isahin muna natin yung mga mahalagang issue na dapat nating talakayin sa kasalukuyang problema sa huling Philippine Reef. Una, ang isa sa malaking issue dito sa punto ng Pilipinas ay isa tong violation ng ating sovereign rights dahil ang Huling Philippine Reef ay nakapaloob sa ating exclusive economic zone. At sa mga usap-usapan naman namin dito sa mga kaibigan natin sa security sector, lalo na sa Armed Forces of the Philippines, ay tinitingnan din natin to na bilang violation ng ating territorial waters dahil nakapaloob to sa ating Palayan Island Group. So yan ang dalawang halagang issue na dapat nating malaman at ang iba pang mga issue dito ay yung issue ng unregulated, illegal, and unreported fishing activities o kaya yung mga excessive fishing activities sa area na yan. At yung pang-apat, yung increase sa militia activities ng China sa issue na yan. So kung titingnan natin sa punto de vista ng Pilipinas, ay isa siyang malaking threat talaga sa ating seguridad. It is a national security issue. Pero dapat din natin maintindihan, Melo, na ang issue sa West Philippine Sea o sa kabuuang issue sa South China Sea o sa kabuuang South China Sea, ang problema sa Huling Philippine Reef ay hindi lamang issue ng banta sa seguridad ng Pilipinas. Ito rin ay issue sa banta sa seguridad ng ating rehiyon, lalong-lalo na sa Southeast Asia at yung mga littoral countries sa South China Sea. So isa siyang malaking regional security issue at ito ay patuloy na pinag-uusapan ng bansa sa Southeast Asia dahil nakikita nila na malaking challenge ito sa regional security. At yan ang issue din dyan. So ang isa pang gusto kong i-highlight na issue na hindi lamang to threat sa ating national security, hindi lamang to threat sa ating regional security, threat din to sa international peace and security. So tatlo yung levels niyan na Melo dahil mai-involve dito yung major powers. Ang US ay increasingly involved sa issue ng South China Sea at nakita natin dito yung malaking pagbabago sa posisyon ng Estados Unidos dahil dati ang posisyon ng Estados Unidos sa South China Sea ay neutral siya at hindi siya nakikialam sa issue ng territorial conflict sa South China Sea. Pero sa nangyari sa Huling Philippine Reef ay nagbago ang kanilang posisyon, luminaw ang kanilang posisyon. Sila ay pumapanig sa Pilipinas. Kumbaga, nag-take side na ngayon ng US, nag-take side siya sa Pilipinas. At hindi lamang nag-take side sa Pilipinas, inarticulate pa nito yung handa niyang depensahan ng Pilipinas kung sakasakalang ma-threaten tayo under the terms of the Mutual Defense Treaty. So may involve dito yung major power at alam naman natin na yung China ay ang kaisa-isang major power claimant sa South China Sea. So kung ang problema sa South China Sea ay mag-develop into major power rivalry, pwedeng ito maging tipping point ng greater conflicts involving major powers at yan ay magiging banta sa seguridad ng buong mundo. So tatlo ang threats ang tinitingnan natin dito: national security ng Pilipinas at regional security ng Southeast Asia at international peace and security ng buong mundo. So sa national security issue, titingnan natin ito sa punto de vista ng Pilipinas, pero hindi lamang dapat tayo malimit sa punto de vista natin dahil nakasalalay din dito yung regional security at international security. Ito, Melo, isa sa mga gusto kong ibahagi sa ating dito total ko. Konti lang tayo dito pero pwede rin naman ma-report na na-highlight kasi dito yung issue ng alitan ng China at ng Pilipinas sa Huling Philippine Reef pero hindi natin pag-usapan yung involvement ng Vietnam. Isa sa mga naging magandang resulta ng issue na to ay nakabuig din yung mga Vietnamese militias na naglalayag din sa area na yan. At sa aking pananaw, Melo, yung increased militia activities ng China sa West Philippine Sea o sa Spratly, yung tinatawag natin sa Spratly, ay intended hindi lamang sa Pilipinas kundi mas intended to sa militia activities din ng Vietnam sa area na yan. So isa yan sa mga dapat din natin tingnan yung papel ng Vietnam sa issue ng Spratly conflict dahil hindi lamang ang Vietnam ang nagsasagawa ng militia activities sa area na yan, ay hindi lamang China kasagawa ng militia activities sa area na yan, pati na rin ang Vietnam. Kaya anong ngayon ang pwede nating response sa issue na to? Ang issue dito ay dapat nating alalahanin na wag nating titingnan ng conflict sa South China Sea, lalo na yung nangyari sa Philippines bilang national security issue only. Ito ay isang regional security issue at international peace and security issue, kaya dapat mag-broaden natin yung ating perspective para mas mabigyan natin ng mas mapayapang lunas yung problema kinakaharap natin. Yun lang muna, Melo.
Thank you. I'd like to remind our friends that we have foreign correspondents listening and watching our discussions. We also have members of the diplomatic corps. Soon to be Dr. Lucio B. Pitlo III. What are your views on what's going on at the South China Sea? What are the issues involved?
Magandang umaga, Melo. Magandang umaga din sa mga kasama ko sa panel. Of course, yung nabanggit na yung...
Mag-English muna tayo, ha? May foreign correspondents, eh. Saka, diplomatic court. Yes, please.
All right. Thank you, Melo, for inviting me to join this panel. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to my fellow co-panelists. The other members of the panel had already outlined issues in relation to the environment. I'll touch more on of course, the implication of the Julian Felipe Reef incident to bilateral relations and to the larger of course, disputes in that maritime area. Of course, I think Professor Jake can discuss more the nature of the Julian Felipe Reef feature, whether it's a high tide elevation or a low tide elevation, and of course that would have impacts in its entitlement, and whether it forms part of the territorial sea of the proximate reef. I think in this case, Hughes Reef. And then, of course, the issue about the unsustainable fishing. Of course, if you have the presence of over 200 fishing vessels in a specific geographic feature, in this case JFR, then it raises a lot of questions about the efficiency, the high capacity of this fishing armada, this fishing flotilla, to really exploit the resources in that area to the detriment of sustainability and to other fishermen who also traditionally fish in that area, to consider that area as part of their traditional fishing ground. Of course, we have seen how the Philippine government had expressed its dismay to China in relation to the issue. Of course, President Duterte spoke with Ambassador Wang. Of course, SFA Locsin went to China to meet his counterpart, Mr. Wang Yi, in Fujian. I think that was Good Friday. And then, of course, recently we also called on the ambassador to express that we would keep up the pressure until we have seen an improvement on the ground. So from over 200, I think some count say it's 240, some say it's 220. Certainly it's over 200. I think last report that I read was it's now down to 9, although they disperse in other parts of the West Philippine Sea. So the presence of these fishing vessels at this time, it's understandable. It's the fishing season. Of course, by end of the month, I think China's unilateral fishing ban would start by May 1 and would run until the mid of August. So if these ships persist after that period or by May, then of course the concerns about the fishing militia, the maritime militia, would certainly heighten. And that said, their mere presence in our exclusive economic zone is a source of concern. If they are not fishing, then all the more. If they are fishing and given the capacity or the disparity between the capacity of our fishermen, most of which are subsistence level or artisanal fishermen, compare that to mechanized trawlers coming in from countries like China and Vietnam, then this is really a big concern for the sustainability of the West Philippine Sea as far as living marine resources is concerned. So I will end there. Maybe we can talk uh, more points later. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Attorney Jay, how far can diplomatic protests go? Legally speaking, how far can we go? Because, according to Secretary Locsin, they've been filing protests daily, day in, day out. How far can all this go?
Well, diplomatic protests go as far as they need to. Remember, yung protest is a communication, and therefore it is part of the parang ongoing negotiation of relations with another country. Okay, um, people seem to have this strange notion that just because you say something, no, things happen. No, yun ang problema natin, I think, with the public's perception of a diplomatic protest. No? Una, the protest at minimum, it establishes the legal position of the state. Okay, it establishes its position in a negotiation over a particular issue. Okay, its relations over a particular issue. So in a way, this at least will ensure that our position over, say, sovereignty, sovereign rights, jurisdiction over specific areas and specific issues relevant to the West Philippine Sea, that is very clear and on record. Okay. The other side cannot later on say that no, you acquiesce, pumayag ka dito, or you didn't say anything and therefore you agreed to our position. They cannot say that anymore. So that's the first. That's one of the most important values of a diplomatic protest. Second, continuing diplomatic protest means that the issue is not yet settled. Okay, and it is not satisfactorily resolved until the country which has been issuing the protest, no, and continuing to communicate its position, no, has been satisfied. Okay, so yun yung nangyayari ngayon. That's what's happening now. We continue to do so. We continue to protest until we achieve the objective of China actually pulling out its vessels from our EEZ and stopping its illegal fishing in our waters. Okay. Further than that, no, syempre, this is the conversation going on between the states officially. But syempre, you don't negotiate with just words, laway lang. Okay, that has to be accompanied or supported by action on the ground, and that's where the AFP has come in recently, where they've been continuously monitoring the movement of these maritime militia vessels and fishing vessels. Okay, that's how they know that China is not complying with whatever statement they made before that call. Like supposedly when the Philippines asked them to pull out, supposedly they said it will be taken up with Beijing. No, nothing happened, and therefore they were not responding. Okay, or at least the Philippine government is not satisfied with whatever response they made. No, so that will keep on going. No, until you have that satisfaction, these parang supporting actions, no, are necessary. No, in order to keep that discussion going until you get what you want from the other side. Okay, so right now, surveillance flights, maritime patrols have increased. No? Unlike last couple of years, halos wala. Unti-unti lang, or maybe once a month. But now it's been almost every week because of this incident. And you've seen some effort by the government this time to show the flag, at least in these areas. No? So those are signs. Those are basically signals as well, no, to sort of support and accompany the diplomatic communication that's going on between the states at the official level. Okay? Ganun yun. Don't think people should not think that the diplomatic protest is the only thing to watch out for and to expect a result only from a diplomatic protest. It's only part of a wider set of actions that the state carries out, no, in trying to address that a particular issue or situation.
Yeah. Attorney Jay, if I recall it right, there were two incidents this month. One was when the Chinese ambassador was summoned to the DFA, and the other was when the ambassador greeted President Duterte on his birthday. Advanced greetings on his birthday, according to spokesperson Secretary Harry Roque. So, would summoning an ambassador to the DFA be enough? We haven't heard that our good friend Chito Santa Romana was called by Minister Wang Yi in his office.
No, summoning an ambassador simply signals the seriousness of the issue. No, so that there be
Yes. Hello. Okay. What happened? Let's give it a try. Is it the internet again? Excuse me.
interaction is a different thing. Okay? So, the
Excuse me.
content,
We were
yeah,
interrupted with the internet. Pakiulit lang. Yes, please.
Right. yan. Sige, I'll turn off the video to listen. Summoning the ambassador is only a step. No, it's also a form. In a way, it's a form or a mode of communication that signals that the seriousness of what they need to talk about. So between the emissary of the other nation and the head of the foreign ministry, at minimum, that shows you that it's really high level discussion. Okay, that's how serious it is that they need to talk about it directly. Pero the content of that discussion and what comes out of it is a different matter. Na it does not necessarily follow, no, that it's the mere fact of summoning the ambassador which produces a result. No, syempre, that's just part of the communication process between the states.
Okay. Yeah, very well. I'd like to open the floor to our colleagues from the media who may have questions. The first to register her intention to ask questions is Angie Chen of Central News Agency. Angie, good morning. Where are you? I'd like to see you too. Go ahead with your questions. Angie? Angie? Hello? All right. Something may be wrong somewhere. But the questions are as follows. Chinese maritime militia has been in the West Philippine Sea for a long time. Is there any particular reason that the issue raises much more attention this time? Is it because of the Biden administration's new approach and attitude to China, and how Taiwan Strait factor plays in this issue? And in the case that China really wants to start a war to get Taiwan, how this what did she say? And in the case that China really wants to start a war to get Taiwan, how this region and the Philippines will be affected? Do you think there is any possibility that Taiwan can work with the Philippines or other countries in the region? And do you think the Duterte administration will have a tougher stance to China on the issue because of the 2022 elections? I need volunteers from the panel.
Ang dami.
Oh.
You should
Sino
put it on the chat. Yeah, you should put it on the chat. That's so many.
Yeah.
But
Yes,
let me just probably try to address the first one based on what I know. No?
Yes,
It's
please.
true that Chinese maritime militia have been in the West Philippine Sea for quite some time. No? And if you remember, 2017 or 2018, and then 2019, it was already raised by the AFP that they were always present. They were basically encircling Pag-asa Island. And that by 2018, they were now seen continuously present in places where they didn't used to be, like between Kota and Panata Island, no? A little bit further into the Philippine EEZ. I think that during that time, there was already a demand for them to be withdrawn. 2019, April 4, if you recall, the DFA issued a very strongly worded statement, probably the first really strongly worded statement, demanding that these be pulled out by China. Okay, so 2 years later, all of a sudden, there's an unusual number of them, all gathered up in one particular location. So this is, I think, the first time that the Philippines has witnessed that many vessels at any one time in any one place of Chinese maritime militia vessels. So naturally, this raises concern. This could raise an alarm, and you can see from the initial release of the NTF that in what they were concerned about is that this might be preparatory to another occupation, no? Or if not an actual occupation by building structures, then at least a kind of operation like what has happened to us in the case of Scarborough, where they're continuously there, continuously present, and we are unable to access the place. Okay, so that I think is the main concern, no? And that's why there had to be some form of response, and the response is a diplomatic activity, no, preceded by revealing the presence of this huge fleet, no, in one location.
Okay. All right. So that's for the first question. Any takers for the second question on the Taiwan possibility of getting involved? Dr. Banlawi, you're a security expert, and Lucio, a scholar. Takers, please.
Melo, when you talk about the issue of Taiwan, that falls under the larger security agenda of the United States. And if you will recall, the Philippines is very important for the United States because it can also provide access to Taiwan Strait, not only in the South China Sea. It's part of the overall intention of the United States to keep Taiwan from being democratic and not being invaded by mainland China, and also to keep the Philippines to continue to be democratic, and also to maintain its influence in the region. And this is the fear of the United States, that if China establishes stronger control of the South China Sea, it can weaken U.S. control of the region, and that would have severe implication for its agenda in the not only in the Taiwan Strait but also in the Korean Peninsula. So it's part of the larger security agenda of the United States. If you force the issue of Taiwan within the debate of the South China Sea disputes. So sa atin, we have to also be mindful of that larger security implications, because South China Sea dispute is not only about South China Sea dispute. As I told you earlier, South China Sea dispute is not only a threat to Philippine national security, but it is also a regional security issue and an international peace and security issue. So we have to see the bigger picture, and Taiwan is part of the bigger picture in the South China Sea disputes.
Yeah. Professor Pitlo, your thoughts?
Well, of course, the timing of the protests, the intensity of the protests, and the noise that we, at least as far as the Philippines is concerned, generating to apply pressure on China on the Julian Felipe Reed issue, of course, also coincides with, I think, the decision on how to proceed with the visiting forces agreement. I think the expiration of the second suspension of the termination of the VFA would be by next month, May. Of course, Professor J also already mentioned that we have commenced the Balikatan exercises despite of the pandemic. Of course, it's also to signal the vitality of the alliance, and of course, also a way to probably send a message to China that we are displeased. We are unhappy about recent developments taking place, particularly in the flashpoint, in this new flashpoint area, the Julian Felipe Reef. And of course, the dispersal, the heavy presence of Chinese fishing or maritime militia elsewhere in our exclusive economic zone. So certainly, there are quarters in the country who wish to see that mill-to-mill military relations between the Philippines and the US would remain robust. And of course, next year would be election year. So expectedly, the pressure on this administration to show resolve, to show strength in dealing with this issue. And certainly this would be certainly a major election voter agenda for May, the West Philippine Sea and our overall relations with China. And of course, the pressure on this administration, if they want to nominate, or endorse an administration slate or an administration picket or candidate for 2022, then of course the issue about how to whether this kind of relations with China is something that we should sustain, uh, and whether there needs to be a major recalibration. Of course, we have seen the rise of political movement, a coalition like the One Sambayan. Of course, you have major stalwart figures there that are known to be very critical of this administration's approach in the West Philippine Sea and in dealing with China. So certainly, I think all of those domestic and external factors, also play into why we are into this much heat or intensity.
What's the term you used? We're in what?
We are in this much heat or
Ah,
intensity.
okay. I thought I heard something else, but looking at the cartoon characters, excuse me, looking at the characters presenting themselves to be presidential timbers or toothpicks, as the case may be, do you think Manny Pacquiao and Sara Duterte would have a grasp of the issues that we have today? Professor Pitlo and Romel and Attorney Jay?
I would like to think that they can form maybe a team of advisors, to help them frame and help them come up with a policy in dealing with our major national security and foreign policy issues. I think relations with China is certainly one. Dealing with the West Philippine Sea is another. So regardless of who sits there, let's wish them well. And let's hope that they would proceed with these matters with the sensitivity and caution and importance, that these issues deserve.
Yeah. Dr.
Yeah,
Romel?
yeah. In my case, Melo, based on my understanding of their preparations for larger political plan, Sara Duterte finished her national security course at the National Defense College of the Philippines. So she's preparing for that, and she continues to engage national security so-called experts and specialists. So I know people surrounding her, and most of them also has this Master in National Security Administration title. So she's preparing. And regarding Manny Pacquiao also finished his Command and General Staff College. So and planning to also attend the national security course at the National Defense College of the Philippines. And also he is surrounded by friends and advisors coming who used to be with the military or retired military or police officers. So that's what I know about his preparation. And also his camp also reached us, talking to us, also asking us some issues pertaining to West Philippine Sea, pertaining to China, pertaining to US, and pertaining to many regional security issues. So they are equipping themselves with the tool
Okay.
of national security tool to prepare themselves for their greater political plans.
Okay, very good. Nobody helped them with their thesis, no?
Wala pa yatang I don't know if they have they're writing this, but what I know about Manny Pacquiao, I think he wrote a thesis political science, at the University of Makati.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's leave it at that for the meantime. We will see in the debates if ever they reach the debates, and let's see what they have to say. Attorney Jay, before I go to Attorney Liza and of course Danny, please go ahead with your thoughts about the people aspiring to become presidents. Do they have a grasp of the enormous issues involved? Jay?
Well, of course, I think however you look at it, it would not be fair to make that assessment at this point in time. I mean, we don't know them. They're the only ones who can claim
Yeah.
a grasp. One thing I'm sure of is that these issues are indeed very complicated, and it will not. It's not enough for only one person to deal with it. Okay, as Lucio said, you need more. No, I mean, more heads are really better than one.
Yeah.
So you only find out. We'll only find out when we see the kinds of advisors that they have. No, on these issues. No, so kung whoever their current foreign policy advisors are, that's probably the only way for us to gain some idea of whether they will be able to handle this well or not.
Yeah. Thank you. Attorney Lisa, you spoke of 33 billion pesos in possible losses due to unreported and illegal fishing. Uh, have you noticed any increase over the years?
Increase in losses or
Yes, in
uh,
losses and incidents.
um, yes, I think based on experts studies presented to us by fisheries sciences, there's been an increase in losses in fisheries. In 2018, the country is considered as one of the top fish producers globally by the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. However, that I don't know with regard to this current status now, because I think our fisheries have been adversely affected. As you know, there have been reports about us being importing fish already, and some of these are actually, there's some rumors that it comes from China, but and
It's from Philippine seas.
yes, from the West Philippine Sea. So we're actually importing our own fishery. So
Yeah. Parang
um
sapatos na sa Marikina ginawa pero binili sa Italy, ganon.
parang ganon. Yes, and I think I have to also share that the Philippines has formally accepted two agreements that are aimed to protect actually our fisheries for sustainability of our country's fisheries. And one of this is actually the compliance agreement, and the other one is the port state measures agreement of the food and agriculture organizations. And unfortunately, while we are parties to these agreements, China is not. The compliance agreement is actually aimed at strengthening control to ensure that vessels comply with their international conservation and management measures. So countries are responsible for ensuring that none of their vessels are fishing unauthorized fishing in the high seas, and they can effectively exercise responsibilities to ensure that their vessels comply with international measures. Port State Measures Agreement is really one that specifically targets IUU fishing. So when foreign vessels seek entry into our ports, it's aimed really to ensure that they have transparency with respect to where they caught their fishes. But unfortunately, I haven't heard of Chinese fishing vessels landing their fish catch here. So even if there is supposed to be national law and regulations, a joint DA-DOTR regulation to enforce this port state measures agreement, we have not yet really implemented it with respect to the West Philippine Sea. Medyo sa ano lang siya sa southern part, like so Fortuna, in General Santos and Davao City, to reinforce in a way, yeah, but not from the west, coming from the West Philippine Sea. So yun, it's unfortunate, but we have all these laws. It's just the effective implementation of these international agreements that are supposed to ensure sustainable fisheries are not being done.
Okay. Danny, standby sandali. Si Jay kasi will have to leave in a couple of minutes. I have a question for Jay from Ray Riquejo. Please ask this question. 2 days ago, U.S. sent thousands of troops and warship in the West Philippine Sea following the swarming of Chinese militia vessels of the Julian Felipe Reef. Does this posture shows U.S. defensive compliance of the MDT, that it is ready to take action to defend the Philippines? Jay?
Well, the deployment of this fleet is parang it's regular in a way. So it was already being monitored even before the issue blew up, I think. No? And besides, you also have the tensions with Taiwan, which have been sort of simmering since the beginning of the year. And because of that, the presence of the Seventh Fleet has also been increasing. No? I wouldn't venture right now a guess whether it's directly the result of, say, a call from the Philippines. No? Especially considering that the Philippines, as far as it's concerned, the VFA is still going to be abrogated. So parang ang labo naman ng nung position na ganun, no? Um, and you have the balikatan exercises also that was scheduled long before, no, around this time. So sorry, we can't really tell. It could be it could be coincidental, but I'm sure their presence there, if it is a coincidence, happens to be a very useful coincidence.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney Jay, and hope to have you again next time. Thank you. Have a
Thank
nice
you.
day.
Well, see ya.
Okay.
Okay, goodbye, folks.
Thank you.
Sorry, I have to go for another meeting. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Danny, yung illegal fishing, tayo yung top producer, no? In 2018. Pero ngayon mukhang kulang na yung resources natin. Yung illegal fishing could also be done by people from other countries fishing in our area, no? Right? And it could also be done by Filipinos, no? Right? So paano natin maka-classify ngayon yung illegal?
Yeah, actually kung titinan natin yung regulations natin sa 10654, yung illegal fishing done by Filipinos is called illegal fishing. Yung done by other countries, medyo mas tinatawag siyang poaching kasi they're fishing in our waters using with carrying different flags other than the country. No? Ang hirap lang kasi talagang ma-identify, for example, using VIRS data, yung pinakita ko kanina, yung satellite detection. Kaya nga, ang importante talaga, the Philippines should really assert yung mga international agreements natin. We are a member of yung Western and Central Pacific Fisheries Commission, yung WCPFC, and marami namang regional fisheries management organizations na malinaw yung mga usapin tungkol sa agreements sa pangingisda, bilateral agreements, kung allowed. Like for example, kanina isang malinaw is yung fishing vessels should really have their AIS turned on all the time. In fact, dapat hindi nila pinapatayan or going dark. Kaya pag nag-go dark nga sila, for the Attorney J, di ba? Ay, Doc J kanina, di ba? Parang we are really in the dark kung nasaan na sila. And we have a service happening in other countries as well, hindi lang naman sa Pilipinas. Pero yun nga, if I were to answer your question about, the presidential elections next year, kung yung mga presidential boss are aware of this issue, I think they should be. Kasi ang mga Pilipino ngayon, naghihinaing na eh. May mga kausap kaming mga mangingisda sa Subic. Sila ay mga miyembro ng Subic Commercial Fishing Association. Sila ay mga commercial vessels na lumalaot ng mas malayo sa 15 kilometers kasi nakalaan ng 15 kilometers for municipal fishermen. Yeah. Pero sabi nga nila, ang lungkot lang nila kasi gustong-gusto nilang sumunod sa batas natin talaga. Pero pag nandun na sila sa laot, ang nakakabangga naman nila ay mga banyagang mga mangingisda. Sasabihin nila, yun Vietnamese, yun Chinese, etc. So sabi nila parang, sana naman lang daw yung gobyerno natin, bigyan sila ng proteksyon na sumusunod sila sa batas, bibili sila ng mga devices para lang mag-comply sa batas natin tulad ng VMM. Pero sana naman pag nandun na sila sa laot, proteksyon na naman yung karapatan nilang mangisda sa katubigan natin or in our waters. That they should, like for example, if they will install transponders and they will press the distress button just in case there's some altercation with foreign vessels or like what happened in Denver, an accident, they hope our vessels, our agencies can respond. Pero in most of the time though, they said they would comply with all the requirements, but they're facing foreign vessels dun sa laot and they're left on their own. And then that's their wish or their hopes for the new leadership that's coming in sa 2022 daw. Parang I just talked to their president, sabi niya, nga Danny, we really want to see change na sana yung rights namin dun sa waters natin will be respected by other countries as well.
Okay, very good. Siguro you can invite me to the place and I'll talk to the fishermen myself and find out their sentiments.
Yeah, maybe we can invite them next time. They can speak. They're very articulate sa karapatan nila. They comply with our laws and Their only request is the government provides the needed support for them to be able to fish outside municipal waters.
Yeah. For Attorney Liza, may tanong dito si Paul Icamina, is the 33 billion loss in potential revenue from fishing, is this in the West Philippine Sea alone or in the whole country? More details, please. Attorney Liza, please. Attorney Liza? Nawala si Attorney Liza.
Hello, sorry.
Yeah,
Um,
your camera, please.
Yes, yung 33 billion loss is in particular hindi naman sa I think West Philippine Sea. I think it's the loss from IUU fishing overall sa lahat. So pero malaki 'yon. Malaki 'yon ang contribution ng nawawala from panatag, from Spratlys, mainly due sa reclamation activities at saka illegal fishing nga. This is according to the Filipino marine scientists that we have. So as shared by Danny in the chat. So sabi to ng UPMSI na marine scientist natin na si Deo Onda. So ganito kalaki pero conservative estimate pa nga to considering yung ating kasi pinaka 'di ba highly biodiverse tayo. I think one of the highly biodiverse countries in the world when it comes to fisheries and coastal resources. So that's just a conservative estimate. So yon, we don't know what is the real value that we are losing from IUUF.
Okay, very well. May tanong si Chino Gaston. Chino, please go ahead. Good morning and welcome to the discussions. Please go ahead with your question. Chino.
Hi, good morning. Sirs and ma'ams. I'm Chino Gaston from GMA 7. I would just like to ask yung opinion ng people here. You think the West Philippine Sea is parang ano ba? You think it's enough reason to justify the rumor circulating now, no, the information circulating now that the military is holding hostage or having a pressure group or exerting pressure on the government because of the seeming inaction or acquiescence to China? I think validating the rumors is probably on top of a lot of journalists' mind and even normal people's minds nowadays. That's my question. Melo.
Okay. Dr. Romel, your thoughts, please. Romel?
Melo, thank you, Chino, sa question. First of all, the Department of National Defense already denied the report. It described the report as fake news. And even the Armed Forces of the Philippines, General Subihana already dismissed the authenticity of that incident. There was no such thing as withdrawal of support. So, but will that encourage the Armed Forces of the Philippines? The situation in the South China Sea, will that encourage the Armed Forces of the Philippines to withdraw support? I don't think so. Based on our experiences, the military withdrew support against sitting government when the sitting government is perceived to be highly corrupt. So Marcos is a corruption and Strada is a corruption. So, but when it comes to the West Philippine Sea, the issue was inaction. I don't think there was inaction in the South China Sea that will merit military withdrawal because they are sending patrols, and through the years we have been acquiring patrol ships and surveillance planes to develop Philippine capability to defend itself. So that's it. And then the Duterte government is also accommodating the position of the Armed Forces of the Philippines to have greater engagement with the United States. Now we have the we have the Balikatan exercise. And I would like to share also that during the telephone conversation between Secretary Lorenzana and Secretary Austin conveyed a strong message to Secretary Lorenzana that the United States wants to keep the visiting forces agreement. And Secretary Lorenzana also told Secretary Austin that personally he also wants to keep the visiting force agreement, but he will convince President Duterte to keep the visiting force agreement. Okay, but this is what's not being discussed publicly yet. That even the United States is involved in vaccine diplomacy. During the call of Secretary Lorenzana to Secretary Austin, Secretary Lorenzana reminded Austin about about the delivery of Moderna to the Philippines. So I'm having this thinking that okay, we will deliver the Moderna but keep the visiting forces agreement. So US is also involved in vaccine diplomacy, and I don't think the current situation in the South China Sea will merit military withdrawal against the sitting government.
Romel,
Sorry.
hindi yan siguro vaccine diplomacy yun. Baka mas appropriate yung vaccine blackmail.
Kung tayo, diplomatic tayo.
Okay.
Diplomatic, so
Okay.
blackmail.
Melo,
But, yeah.
So sorry, singitan ko lang, Prof, just to follow up on your point. So it's not about all of the hullabaloo na kakagulo sa West Philippine Sea. It's not actually about the West Philippine Sea, but actually about VFA.
It's also about West Philippine Sea because the United States will not be able to access our territory without the BFA. The United States needs the Philippines, needs to access Philippine territory in order to sustain its presence in the area. The United States has one major security agenda in the South China Sea, and that is the maintenance of the freedom of navigation. And freedom of navigation does not only mean freedom of navigation of commercial activities, but also military activities involving US ships. So that's the main agenda. For China, freedom of navigation is not hampered as long as freedom of navigation is confined to commercial activities. Okay, but for the United States, freedom of navigation shall also include military activities, lawful military activities.
Okay. All right. Professor Lucio?
Yeah, if I may add on, I also share the view of Sir Romel that, of course, it's far from ideal, but I wouldn't say that it's in action. So I think on the diplomatic and on the defense side, we have taken measures within the bounds of our resources and our capabilities, to want to signal that, of course, we are unhappy about the situation. We have engaged China in multiple levels. Our president talked with the ambassador of China here. Our foreign minister flew to Fujian to talk with his Chinese counterpart. The AFP had intimated how serious they think the situation is with the Chinese defense attaché. So all of those mechanisms have been exhausted, and we have seen the drawdown the number of Chinese vessels, at least as far as Whitsunreef is concerned, from over 200 to just around 9. So again, it's a small victory, but if you look at the broader area, of course, you already have the presence of the artificial islands of China there. That would only increase the capacity of China to patrol, hopefully not to interfere. But of course, we are hearing reports of interference in our economic activities, notably in fishing. So every time those issues arise, we have to protest them. We have to call out the attention of China, and we have to engage them. So that's on the diplomatic front. Now, as far as the Defense Department is concerned, I think the administration's commitment in relation to military modernization, acquisition of new platforms, is very strong. We have acquired two new frigates, no, built in South Korea. We have also upgraded our facilities in Pag-asa, the seat of the Kalayaan Island Group. I think that achievement, no, long overdue, and I think it may help strengthen our capacity to undertake patrols, no, because instead of our patrols coming out from Puerto Princesa, if we can have an oil depot and have the necessary facilities in Pag-asa, it would be easier, faster for us to respond every time there's a contingency taking place in the Kalayaan waters. So I think these are welcome developments. Again, the optics and the rhetorics are there's a great need to improve on that department. But I think in action would be an adjective that would go too far for the time being. Um, Again, also, we are not the only country, smaller country relative to China on the South China Sea disputes. No? And in all the standoffs, no, from the 2019 Vanguard Bank standoff between Vietnam and China, and last year, no, the three-way standoff between Malaysia, Vietnam, and China on waters, no, southern part of the South China Sea. All of these were eventually resolved by the concerned parties, no, through dialogue. Again, it was not overnight. The withdrawal of the ships took place, no, after days and weeks of negotiations. This would be a long-running issue. This would be a long-running issue. And we need to put in resources, the patience, and the sustained political will, engage if we have to, and push back if we must. So I think these are all important considerations when we look at the West Philippine Sea issue.
Okay. Do we have questions from Raisa Robles? Raisa, good morning. Hello, Raisa. Raisa of the South China Morning Post. All right. Wala pa sigurong tanong si Raisa. Pero katulad nito, my friends, well, of course, Dr. Mel Banlawi is the president of the Philippine Association for Chinese Studies. No, what do you think is there in the Chinese psyche when they want to show their force in the South China Sea? Is it a manifestation of their strength? Is it a psychological weapon to tell us that whatever we do, we can be defeated, as what our good president said? Why do I want to start a war? Matatalo lang tayo. Dr. Banlawi, please.
Thank you, Melo, for asking that question. First, China does not also want a military situation in the South China Sea, because that will also affect its overall economic agenda. What China is doing is doing activities and establishing state practices that they think can be lawful. Like, for example, their presence in Hulian Philippine Reef. This is the thinking of China. They saying that the land features in Hulian Philippine Reef belong to them as part of their territorial water, and therefore they are in fact allowed under existing international law, especially UNCLOS, to park within 12 nautical miles of any land features in the strat list. So that's their argument. And they are also allowed to conduct activities within 12 nautical miles in any land features that they currently control. So that's their argument. So what they're doing is just testing, testing neighbors on how the neighbors will respond to China's so-called local activities, because in the minds of China, what they are doing are all lawful activities, because of their perspective, the land features within the 9-dash line belong to them, and therefore they're allowed to do any type of activities there as long as it is lawful. And most importantly, Melo, they are not using military ships. They are using militia vessels. So civilian vessels indicating that they are trying to do a lot of activities that are military in nature. Ito yung tinatawag natin. This is what we are saying, gray zone operations in the South China Sea. And I hope you're also preparing for such kind of operations, because I think that's now what China is doing to increase its capability to operate and even win any battle in the gray zone.
Okay. Lucio, do you share the same views? Lucio?
Sir, pwede pong paulit ng tanong? Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, paano kasi yung bang pagpapakita ng barko, yung bang pagpapakita ng lakas ng China, kahit pa civilian at militia yung nakasakay, is it not in a way convincing us that we cannot do anything with their presence?
Well, certainly. I think China, of course, wanted to expand its military projection, and South China Sea is an area where that can be displayed. Of course, it's near seas. They consider it detrimental to their security if it falls under the control of rival or adversarial powers. Of course, the problem is, of course, the contested nature of the waters and the features in the area that complicates, of course, China's agenda. Of course, there are fears that China may eventually take full control, and that may impact on civilian or commercial navigation. And also some stories before, of China eventually coming up with an air defense identification zone on the airspace above the South China Sea. So those certainly are concerns being raised privately, and I think diplomatically and openly by think tanks, security circles following developments in the South China Sea. So I think the onus for China, if it wants to be perceived as a benevolent neighbor and a responsible neighbor, is to one, address its issues, its disputes with neighbors peacefully, without, of course, the threat of coercion. Of course, the code of conduct negotiations, which have been delayed. The pandemic has certainly affected the pace and the momentum. But this year, we have Brunei, which is also a climate state in the South China Sea, although more of a low-key one, is the chair. The Philippines remains the ASEAN-China country coordinator, and I think it's very much likely that the Philippines and Brunei, working with other littoral states like Indonesia and Malaysia, and especially Vietnam, will push for the conclusion of a legally and binding COC at the soonest possible time, because we see incidents like the Julian Pilipiri as indicative of the future of how tensions can rise because of competition for access to diminishing marine resources, in this case fisheries, in the case of Vanguard Bank, and last year between Malaysia, Vietnam, China, over oil and gas. So the competition for resources will drive conflict, absent cooperative arrangements or a code of conduct to have a modus vivendi, an agreement on the behavior that would be deemed unprofessional and should be avoided, to prevent miscalculation or conflict among disputants.
Okay, very well. All right, we're about to wind up our discussions today. Danny, anong nakikita mo? What do you foresee in the near future? What will happen to our resources? Will you have more sophisticated data from your associates? What can you present next time sa ating forum?
Actually, Melo, it's really difficult to answer that. I think when we're dealing with technology to address certain issues, may catch up rin naman for those who are trying to evade those technologies. Like, for example, if you're using VIIRS, some fishing vessels are now using underwater or submersible lights so that they cannot be seen by the satellite. But what really has to happen is for the government to have concrete plan to manage our fisheries, and also to have the political will to address issues such as poaching and such as indiscriminate IUF in the country. Kasi kung makikita ng mga nag-violate ng batas natin that the government is not really taking this seriously, then people will always go on and do business as usual. But if somebody puts a foot down, especially from the upper levels of our government, saying, seryoso na kami, we will address poaching, we will address illegal fishing, then people will actually follow. Like I would like to think na sa darating na election, people are really clamoring for something that's more concrete when it comes to environmental conservation and managing our fisheries. Nagagalit na yung mga maliliit na mangingisda kasi we're experiencing a pandemic and people have returned to the sea for sustenance, for economic, for livelihood sources. But to use the pandemic as an excuse to allow commercial fishing in municipal waters, like what's happening now in a certain bill in Congress, yung House Bill 7853, mali yan. We have to really all the more protect our resources because this is where people go just in case other sources of economic activities are collapsing or stopping because of the pandemic.
Okay. Thank you, Danny. Attorney Liza, looking into your crystal ball, what do you see? Yes, please.
Yes. Thank you,
Your
Melo.
video, please. Your video.
Oh, sorry. Sige. Thank you, Melo, for inviting me. Looking into the future, I know that this is a very touchy subject when it comes to the territorial claims, but what's happening actually is really important. We have to look at the area as also a very important ecosystem, marine ecosystem. So there has to be a degree of regional management and governance of this ecosystem. I know that there are barriers to that with the competing territorial claims, but I think we need to prioritize because I think it's high time that we look at it together. I know yung code of conduct nga would be one way of doing it, but actually there are other regional bodies that can, like Asia Pacific Fishery Commission, regional fisheries management organizations. There are some scholars who say na there are actually, they have proposed the establishment of an international marine peace park in the area, or a marine protected area network in the South China Sea, as well as these condominium arrangements as a legal mechanism for the conservation of the South China Sea large marine ecosystem. So I guess we need to look at it as a natural ecosystem that we cannot wait until all these competing claims, territorial claims, because that it's very important for us to continue protecting this area because it's for the sustainability of fisheries, not only for the Philippines, but the neighboring countries around South China Sea. So that's what I hope to see in the future.
Very good. And we'd like to have you again. We will talk about other issues too. Okay?
Certainly.
Yeah. Lucio. Yeah. Thank you, Attorney. Lucio, what do you see in the near future?
Well, certainly the disputes will be sustained. I think we have to want to look at the impact of the major power rivalry, the South China Sea. That was raised already by Professor Berlawi earlier. If we recall the Alaska summit last March between officials from the U.S. and China, there's no illusion that great power competition, the intense intensity by which this will be waged the coming years, this will be the defining feature of international relations, fortunately, going forward. Of course, the Philippines is situated in a very strategic location. We command the sea lanes approaching continental Asia from the wider Pacific. And so we have to leverage our position in order to maximize gains for us. Again, it would not be easy for us in the coming years because these two countries are crucial to us, security-wise and economy-wise. So it's a balancing act that we have to tread, and we have to tread carefully. Also, again, next year would be election time. So we hope to see that the aspirants, for the top positions in our country's public offices would have of course, the wisdom, uh, the patience, the prudence, to handle these delicate issues. Of course, our relations with China is very important. The South China Sea is but a small part of it. No? Of course, the economic infrastructure, of course, cooperation for the pandemic response and economic recovery. So all of that are part and parcel of our broad relations with China. The U.S., of course, is our long-standing ally, over 70 years of alliance. I think we have seen that the alliance can evolve, can change, and I think we have to assert more agency in charting its course. But to do that, we also have to invest in building our own defense and maritime capacity. So we have to invest in technologies like what Sir Danny mentioned. I think there are now commercially available technologies that small countries like the Philippines can maybe buy subscription, maybe we understand our asset limitation when we go out in the West Philippine Sea. So I think these technologies will certainly help us, level, maybe close many gaps, in our maritime domain awareness. Of course, we have to sustain investment in maritime patrols. I think we are in talks to, I heard we are in talks to acquire some subsea capabilities. I think France and Russia were among the suppliers that were reported. So certainly those things are being considered. Of course, the timeline would be affected. Defense acquisitions might be affected because of the pandemic, the short term. But we have to sustain the momentum in terms of committing to our military and Coast Guard modernization, because that is the only that's the one of the best ways to protect our vast maritime domain, and also to address concerns of our fishermen that when they venture out into sea, and if they experience distress and they make calls, somebody will be there to respond. We owe it to our fishermen, and we owe it to the industry that are supported or are dependent, people dependent on the livelihood, their livelihood dependent on the West Philippine Sea, to improve our maritime defense capability and support for our fishermen, to say the least. So
Okay.
I think that the international factor and the domestic factor, those things gel in the West Philippine Sea, and we have to be mindful of those variables when we, of course, craft our long-term policy, and that policy has to be sustained. Uh, Again, the problem with us, yung continuity, it's always a challenge because of this changing of the guards, leadership transition every 6 years. Our The continuity of our policy in dealing both with China and in dealing with the West Philippine Sea sometimes suffers from a lack of sustained continuity. So I hope more awareness of this issue and the importance of international and regional and also domestic developments will inform the next batch of leaders about how crucial these issues are, and the need to come together when these issues rise.
Okay. Very well. Professor Romel, yung tanong kasi ni Chino kanina, ni Chino Gaston, simple lang. Yung tungkol doon sa withdrawal of support ko, na meron namang pahayag yung Armed Forces at yung National Defense Department, na hindi totoo yan, fake news yan. Pero what may have given the idea was probably that Section 3 of Article 2 of the Philippine Constitution, which says that the armed forces of the Philippines is the protector of the people and the state. And I recall way back in, was it 1999, there was this event at the Manila Overseas Press Club, and Tony Lopez asked then Chief of Staff General Angelo Tomas Reyes, may he rest in peace, this question: on which side would the armed forces be? Would it be on the side of the state or of the people, especially when the state becomes so unpopular? And without batting an eyelash, then Chief of Staff General Angelo Reyes said, "Don't worry, Tony, your armed forces will be on the side of the people." However, the latest survey by Publicos Asia said that most Filipinos still trust the president. Now, is the president synonymous to that of the state? That is another question. So anyway, Romel, for your closing statements, please.
By way of closing, I would like to share Melo about the future of the South China Sea disputes. And this
Again.
week, the
Oh.
BOA Forum for Asia is being held. And on Wednesday, there will be a closed door session on the South China Sea. And I will speak on the issue of crisis management in the South China Sea. So you will see here that even China is very much interested to manage the existing crisis in the South China Sea. And not only that, part of the major sessions during this closed door activity is to talk about cooperation among the coastal states in the South China Sea amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. So there will be coastal states referring not only to the claimant states but all littoral states in the South China Sea. So for me, that is the direction in the South China Sea, that although there will be maritime conflicts, there will be territorial disputes, but I think the way ahead in the South China Sea is cooperation and crisis management.
Okay. Now,
That's all.
what about the armed forces thing?
Oh, about that, Melo, it's very difficult to withdraw support against the current government that is considered to be still popular. President Duterte, despite his limitations to address and face the COVID-19 pandemic, he continues to be popular. And I think the armed forces of the Philippines now, they are quite happy with what they are getting from the government. Duterte raised their salary, and I've been talking to a lot of officers. They're happy about their salary. So what will motivate them to uh, withdraw their support? And at the same time, the purchase of military assets to develop our military capabilities. They're all happening under Duterte. All the previous efforts were done by previous governments, but we have seen a lot of deliveries of military assets under the Duterte administration. And based on my understanding of what's going on in the military, they know the diplomatic actions of the president and also his military plans, just in case we run out of diplomatic options. So the National Task Force on West Philippine Sea, the National Security Council, they're all talking with each other, and I don't think the situation in the South China Sea will be the reason for the military to withdraw their support. Not yet that problematic. But let's see how the current situation will evolve. But I don't think that the current situation will encourage the military to withdraw their support against President Duterte.
Okay, very well. Mga kaibigan, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who took time out to be with us, foreign correspondents, members of the Diplomatic Corps, friends from different sectors. Just to give you an idea, by Wednesday, do sa kabilang forum, yung Roundtable with Philippine Press Institute, a monthly undertaking with the Hans Seidel Foundation, we will be talking about vaccine acquisition and the economy in the light of the COVID-19 pandemic. So this will be our topic, and Mr. Kelly Bird of the Asian Development Bank is the country director for the Philippines, will be joining us with Assistant Secretary Paula Alvarez of the Department of Finance. We're expecting no less than Secretary Carlito Galvez, the vaccine czar, to sit with us. and probably somebody from the World Bank in the Philippines. Not necessarily siguro yung country director for Brunei, Malaysia, Philippines, and Thailand, but we're expecting a representative. So we'd like to talk about where to get the vaccines. Do we have the vaccines that we can buy? How transparent are the deals? All these things. And of course, the impact on the economy. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. God bless us all. And of course, we can always dream because they haven't taxed dreaming yet. God bless us. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Ito ang Oragon Internet Television. Maaasahan sa balanced news in public affairs, education, music, and information gamit ang makabagong teknolohiya sa pamamahayag. Maaasahan sa katotohanan, kaagapay ng mamamayan sa pagkikipag-ugnayan sa pamahalaan. Oragon Internet Television Broadcasting.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now conclude another day of broadcasting activities. You have been watching to this virtual broadcast station, Oragon Internet Television Broadcasting, a commercial non-stop virtual broadcast station through Facebook and YouTube. Registered with business name number 1909782 by the Department of Trade and Industry, and authorizing to operate until July 2, 2025. Oragon Internet Television Broadcasting is now signing off.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang magiliw, pero sa silanganan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y bumay. Lupang bihirang, kuya ka ng magiting, sa mandulupin, di ka pasisihil, sa nagatang tutok sa simuyan, sa langit mo babaw, ay nilagang tula, tawid sa pagkayang minamahal, ang isang matawad mo'y